Okay, hello everyone. Joe DiChiara, CPA and lifelong entrepreneur, coming to you with our second guest appearance on how to win big at business. And out of all the people that I know, this gentleman definitely knows how to win big.
Huh.
He's a hotelier, he's a born entrepreneur, and we're going to get into that. He's run a huge hotel empire starting from basically nothing. He's been in multiple businesses and he coaches people. He gives his time without basically thinking of what it's costing him. He's been my coach, he's been my mentor, and most importantly, I can call him a good friend of mine. And ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Mr. Larry Broughton. How are you, Larry?
Hello, Dr. DiChiara. How are you? Good to see you.
Oh, now I'm a doctor. It's funny because let me tell you a little story. When Larry first started coaching me, everything was about my health. And Larry's also, and I forgot to mention this, a former special ops Green Beret. Is that right?
Yep.
Special ops Green. Anyway, he's like, and I was expecting him to have me do push-ups and making me sweat. No, it was about how are you with your family relationships?
Yeah.
How are you spiritually? And so that was that was an eye opener. And but he taught me a lot because the truth is if I'm not healthy, how could I possibly run a business? If I can't
Right.
take care of myself, how can I take care of my business?
Right.
Is that right, Dr. Broughton?
Yeah. See, here's the thing. A lot of the stuff that I share with clients and with the world is from mistakes that I've made along the way. And there was a period in my entrepreneurial journey where I was making, lots of money, getting lots of recognition, winning a lot of awards, but I wasn't taking care of my family life. My spiritual life was a mess. Uh, I had no relationship with my family or friends because everything was on the business. And so I basically crashed and burned. It came close to it, scraped along the bottom for a while at least. And so after a lot of journaling and writing and going to therapy and a variety of other things, I'd realized there are kind of 8 spans in our life. And so I created this what I call a whole health spider graph, where we actually measure, put numbers to our physical health, to our spiritual health, to our professional life, to our financial life, right? Family and friends. And there's a saying, what's measured is improved. And when at least you have an awareness that, I'm not doing so well over here, but I'm really killing it over here, then we can actually then set up a plan to get better. So yes, all of anyone that I coach or mentor, we use this whole health spider graph to make sure that we are tracking progress.
So and I got to tell you that was one of the things that really turned it around for me because when I started with you and I was at a low point. I was at a real low point in my life. uh, And I was honest with you. I was like, I can barely pay my rent.
Yeah.
So we agreed on a price that I said, you know what, I'll figure it out. And I'll never forget that spider graph. I still have it. And I got to tell you how it motivated me because I wanted to get the whole spider graph, right? And I'm like most people, it was like, yeah, I'm good in this part, but most of them, I could use a lot of improvement.
Yeah.
So I would look at it all the time and I would say, what do I got to do to improve my family relationships? What do I got to do to improve my spirituality? And it was real when I looked at it that way, it became simple.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, am I calling my kids and my aunt and my mother? So I started calling them and just by coincidence, things started falling into place and my life got better, my business got better. And as that graph, became like the whole spider web,
Yeah.
Things got better for me. And but let's back up a second, because you mentioned something, and this podcast is really all about the entrepreneurial struggle.
Okay.
Right? You mentioned you've been highly, highly successful, but you said, you were winning all these awards, and business was booming, but all these other areas of your life were lacking, right? So this is what I tell clients that give me a chance to tell them: before you start, why don't we define what success is for you?
Mm.
Right? Before you get all wound up, you start, because it's easy to work 80 hours a week, right? And neglect everything else. So because I know you coach a lot of people, how do you get them to actually define success? Because a lot of people think, oh, if I only made this amount of money, then I'll be happy, right?
Yeah.
They put a dollar figure on success.
Yeah, well, I think for me, it's like a lot of folks, my definition of success kind of changes and morphs over time. But I tend to always come back to success being freedom for me, the freedom to do what I want when I want, freedom to have some money in the bank without people breathing down my neck, that sort of thing. But for different people, it's different for different people. And I think you've got to be honest with yourselves, because different seasons bring different challenges, as you know, to life. And so sometimes it's success is just survival. Let's just be honest, right? And I think we've probably all had those stages in our life. So for me, it's freedom, that spiritual freedom without, addictions or, temptations that I don't need in my life. But ultimately, I think for me, it's freedom. I think a lot of people is probably similar to that. I think when you start saying, oh, I've got to have whatever it is, $100,000 of cash in my bank account, or I want to be a millionaire, or I want to, whatever it is, those types of things, although valuable for sure, because we got to be working towards a goal constantly, they change. Listen, it's no secret. I talk about this. My son was killed in a car accident just 4 years ago. We just passed the anniversary as we're recording this. And I can tell you all of my goals changed at that moment. And my definition of success changed at that moment from what they were just, 72 hours prior to this. And we forget sometimes that we got our vision board, and we're going to be doing all these things. But what we don't take into account is, what? This all may get thrown out the window. That this ideal plan that I've got in my head could totally go off track. And so we have to have contingency plans. That's what we call them in the military, 5-point contingency plans. If this happens, then I'm going to, adjust fire this way. And we don't do that in our entrepreneurial journey enough, I don't think. And the other thing I don't think that we do is we don't do what we call AARs, after action reviews, because it will be a struggle. I just don't think there are more and more people talking about failure now. But when I first kind of got into the space, whatever it was 100 years ago, all you heard about were these big successes that people were making, millions, billions of dollars over here. And there was this really gross phase in social media, Joe, that you probably remember, and it's still out there to a degree, where there's these young folks driving around in these fancy cars with fake money in the front seat. And you could have this too. And in fact, I'm going to show you how easy it is to do this. Look at all these $100 bills, right? They're all fake. Okay. No, not wow. They're fake. All right. But you see this oftentimes. You zoom in on that picture, and it'll say on there that this isn't real money, right? I'm paying this here because I have seen it too often. And then you find out, oh, that fancy car that they've got is a leased vehicle. They don't really own it. That kind of thing. But then what happens, though, whatever their agenda is for doing posts like that, you realize there are a lot of people who are falling for it, and they forget. They don't know that there's a lot of struggle that entrepreneurs have, that money is not going to fill that, what they say, a God-shaped void in our hearts, in our souls. And so this is why I really go back to this whole hell spider graph, is that we have to have friends around us. Because there are some times in our life, Joe, where we turn into this lone wolf. And because that has been part of the, I don't know, American story in some ways, I could think this in my own.
That's something that really shocked me, because what I realized, being in business could be extremely lonely,
For sure.
right? And that's what your spider graph showed me. It's like, if I could lock myself in my office and just work and make plenty of money, but then it's like, okay, who do I share it with? What do I do with this money?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I encourage folks to do a little bit of self-reflection, honest self-reflection, and get some people in your life where you can really be transparent, vulnerable, honest with them, and have a level of very, I don't know, a commitment to strict confidentiality between the two of you, right? Like almost like a doctor-patient relationship, right? Because that way, particularly, so it should be a mentor, an accountability group, something like that. Now, I do believe in masterminds. There are some really good mastermind groups that are out there, but you got to define what's a mastermind. Is a mastermind group 12 people or is it 120 people, right? But what is it that works for you, right? Now, what I started with a couple of my buddies several years ago is we get together every Wednesday night. And part of that is it's an accountability, and we get honest with each other. If we're having struggles, if we've been lying to ourselves or lying to business partners or spouses or significant others, right? I think it's really important that we have those types of folks in our group, because if we aren't able to say what's really going on in here or in our business or in our lives, how do you develop a game plan to get out of the mess that you're in? You probably heard me say this before, Joe. I think that there's probably three major areas, three major groups of people we should have in our lives. I say we need to split our lives in thirds. A third of the people in our life ought to be people who are further down the path, the entrepreneurial path, the leadership path, the whatever industry path that we're on. These are people that we look up to. These are people who coach and mentor us. These are people who are the wise sages in our life. And then a third of the people ought to be our peers. These are the people that we go arm in arm into battle with. These are the people that hold us up when we stumble sometimes. And then a third of the people ought to be people that are further behind us, that haven't got to where we are, right? These are the people that we should be mentoring. And we forget about this oftentimes in the entrepreneurial journey, is that much of the feeling of accomplishment comes from when we serve other people, when we help other people reach their goals. Success is not the zero-sum game. If I'm winning, then someone else is losing. If someone else is winning, I'm losing. It's not like that. Success has this infinite quality about it. So there's enough for all of us. The success pie doesn't shrink, right? And I think you realize that when you start serving other people. The analogy that I have is like, I may be a fourth grader, but there's some eighth graders that I can follow. I may be a fourth grader, but there's some first graders that I could be teaching on the path. And so this helps us with our meeting with its struggle.
You told me, I'm sorry to cut you off, but you told a really good story. I think it was about your son, and it resonated with me. It was like, I think he was in third grade or fourth grade. I'm mixing
I
up
can
the
share it really
grades.
briefly if you want. My
Yeah,
kids,
tell
my,
us
my
the
kids
story.
went my kids went to a private school here in Orange County. And I say private school intentionally, not because, oh, you paid for a private school. No, it's because I wanted my kids to have a good education, and the public school system, across the country, particularly in California, was not good. And what I loved about this school, it's called Salem, they really taught leadership in some very subtle ways. And so when you're learning to read, it's in first grade. And so what they would do is the first graders would get together, and then fourth graders who now know how to read would come in, and you'd have a reading buddy. Okay. And the fourth graders would teach these first graders how to read. Along with the teachers, right? And so when you go to drop the kids off at school in the morning, if my first graders, they saw their reading buddy, they got all excited. Like, my reading buddy is like, he's brilliant or she's brilliant. They can read. And they would run up to him and they'd give him a hug. How are you? And they'd all light up. They thought that these fourth graders were gods in their world, right? But the eighth graders who were further down the path, and they'd look at these fourth graders like, you guys are idiots. right? And that's just like, I think it's a good representation of the entrepreneurial struggle, right?
Yeah.
So I think we ought to be hanging out with those folks as much as you can, people that are further down the path than us. But you know what that takes, Joe, is humility. You have to admit that when you don't know some things. And that's kind of one of the traps I find with particularly, I don't want to use the word young, but let's say immature or maybe less seasoned entrepreneurs, is they're not able or willing to say, I don't know, or I made a mistake, or wow, I could have done that better. I was able to go to an art show with a buddy of mine who's one of my early mentors. I call him my spiritual mentor, but he's really an entrepreneurial mentor. He's all kinds of things to me. When he was able to get me to reflexively, boy, I stepped in that one. Boy, I made a mistake there. Or, I don't know, but let's find out. It takes so much pressure off. Instead of trying to pretend all the time that I know every single answer that is ever asked of me. Sometimes it's best to say, I don't know, or we made a mistake on that. How can we fix that? It just really does let the pressure off. When you realize you can do it in this area of your life, you can learn to do it in other areas of your life. The key is not just accepting that I know or that I made a mistake. The key is the next step. How do I get better? How do I fix that? How do I repair it?
I believe that humility is one of the keys to real success. When I look at successful people and I've studied them, and I'm like, there's a common denominator here. Most successful people are humble, right? They have the humility, and it spurs them, I think, to ask for help. And that's one of the things that small business owners don't do, because it's an ego thing, right? They're not willing to ask for help. They don't want to ask for help because it looks like they're struggling, right?
Yeah. Yes, I agree with you 100%. But I want to push on those people who feel that way, because there are people like you and me who, like, if I'm ever hiring someone or I'm trying to find a partner, a joint venture partner for a project, the things we're going to talk about a lot is, tell me about the failures that you've had. Because it's not just the failures. I don't want to rub their nose. I want to hear, how did you overcome it? That's really going to be the key, because it's the tenacity, it's the fight that they have in them afterwards. Winston Churchill has this great quote that said something like, success is not final, failure is not fatal, it's the courage to continue that counts, right? Failure is not fatal. It's how do we respond?
Yeah, thank you for that. So, just so people know, I met you through a good friend of ours, Craig, who was a fraternity brother, and he started a mastermind group. And I was at a point in my life, I was fairly successful, but I was like, this isn't what I want. I want more.
Yeah.
And I was learning about, I read Napoleon Hill and about the mastermind group. And so I traveled out to California and I met great people. I met you. And it really, I can't even, it was invaluable, the stuff that I learned. And what's cool is now I'm applying all of that stuff I learned. But let's get back to you, because you said, in the mastermind, because I was in that group, we were in it for years. I'm still, okay. But you said things that just resonated with me. And you came in one of the groups one time and you just said, serve first, right? So, 2 words. And I took that. I don't know if I ever told you this. I went home and I said, I'm going to do what Larry said. And, I'm looking at my clients and I said, you know what? Instead of figuring out how much I make per hour, why don't I just go through the client list and see what they really need? And I'll start doing it without asking them for any money. And do you know my revenue went up 40% that year?
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't surprise me. I hear stories like this all the time. There's something about serving that brings value to our own lives. Now, I've learned this a bunch of times over the years. Like when someone goes into the military, what do they say? You go into service, right?
Sure.
Oftentimes there's a culture in the US and around the world that when someone meets a veteran, what do they say? Thanks for your service, right? And oftentimes when veterans or military folks get out of the military, a lot of stuff happens. And many of them have emotional and mental struggles. Not all, that's not it, but some do. And I equate a lot of that, not just with the post-traumatic stress that they've experienced, because that post-traumatic stress is just a physiological response to something that happened in their life. It's a natural, part of life. But oftentimes because they no longer have purpose, like nothing can really match that level of service that they. And so it's meaning
Right.
is really what I'm saying to people. You have to find meaning in your life, and we oftentimes find meaning through service, serving other people, right? So when we don't know what to do, when we're floundering around, I oftentimes encourage my mentees, who do you know that needs in your life? How can you serve
Yeah.
someone just a little bit more? I've been on mission trips, around, well, mostly to Africa, but, just here in the US as well, where I thought, when I first started doing this, I'm going to be able to give so much to these people that are in need. But you know what happens every time I come back and I do a little bit of self-reflection? I got so much out of it. By me serving, I was filled up, right? And so I know what it's like to be an entrepreneur and you're just floundering around and you're feeling empty and lost. Well, I'm not saying serve just just for the people that you're serving like you did with your clients, but I know that it's going to give you some meaning as well in your life. And so it's kind of a double-edged
Yes.
sword in some ways that you can then go out and slay the dragons with, because oftentimes when we are feeling overwhelmed, it's because we've got problems in our life. We have challenges in our life, but those challenges and those problems absolutely can be a gift in our lives as well. Because without those challenges, without those problems, we stagnate. Stasis happens, and we stop growing, right? So oftentimes I want people to lean in to the challenges, lean in to the struggles that you have. It's like going to the gym. Your muscles don't get better. Your waist doesn't get smaller if you don't put it under some stress. It's the same thing with our character, the same thing with our mental attitude. So serve. Yes.
Yes, I love that. So let's get back to your entrepreneurial journey.
Okay.
And I asked you, I've known you for a long time. We shared a lot of stuff, personal stuff, business stuff. I've seen you go through a lot of stuff and come out of it. You mentioned like your son passed away. That is devastating. But you said something that after all these years, I've never asked you, like, when did you become an entrepreneur? I believe some people are born into it. Like, I was born to be an entrepreneur. I truly believe that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought incorrectly now that when you got into the hotel business, that was like you stumbled into your bit, but it's not like that. So tell me now, you're telling me that it started when you were like a teenager, right?
Well, I was always that kid that would buy the pack of gum for a certain price and then sell the individual sticks of gum for a larger price. I mean, I understood margins at a young age, right? And then when you actually try to sell that pack of gum at school, where it's kind of forbidden, oh, that's even more that you can make. So I was one of those kind of guys, right? And so I was always kind of in my brain imagining, what I was going to be like when I grew up. And it was always like being a business owner. There were some local business owners in my hometown, very small rural New York, who I kind of admired and respected. Not that there's anything wrong with, like, my dad was salt of the earth, former Marine, fought on Iwo Jima, who came back and did factory work for most of his life. Amazing guy, right? But I wasn't intrigued. I knew that I wasn't going to go work in the factory. I just knew that that was not going to be my life. And my twin brother and I were into martial arts, and we had dreams of opening chains of martial arts studios. And, whether it was delivering papers or mowing lawns, I was always that kid, right? So I did end up going into the military, you had mentioned earlier. And while I was in, I really got an interest in foreign policy, and just felt like we were kind of stepping in it all over the world. I mean, not good stuff back then. And so I thought, well, maybe I can make a bigger impact by running for political office, working for the State Department. And so so I got out with the intention of going to school, university. And my goal at the time was to become the youngest U.S. senator from California. Thank goodness I didn't do that. But I did work on a bunch of political campaigns. But the first job out was as a night auditor at a little no-tell motel in San Francisco. And I went to school during the day, worked at that place, went in at 11 o'clock at night, got off at 7 o'clock in the morning, went to school, during the day, worked out, slept, did the whole thing all over. But after being there for a few months.
So I remember you telling me about this, and I got to just share this so people get the image, because everybody might not know, okay, no Telmo, but you actually had a bulletproof glass, right?
Well, kind of, no. That's what you would do nowadays,
Okay.
right? There was actually a bullet hole in the
Okay.
plate glass windows of the lobby where
Okay.
I worked, which is 44 room property in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. And the Tenderloin, for those who don't know, is kind of riddled with drugs, prostitution, homelessness, all kinds of nefarious activity.
Right.
And so I was around that kind of crowd, often. And but an investment group came in to buy this place, and with the intention of turning it around, and it ended up becoming what was considered one of the first boutique hotels in the country. And I won't bore you with all of the details, but I ultimately became a partner in that company, and we had acquired about 14 hotels over a 14-year period.
So wait a second. Let's back up a second. How do you go from being the night auditor college student to becoming a partner with this? How do you make that jump?
Yeah, yeah. All right. So there's so many details in here. We may have to do a part two to this podcast. So how I did it, I did it because I knew what my strengths were. And at this point, it was leadership, team building, that kind of thing. You got to remember, I just spent a bunch of years in the military, right? Not just in the military, but in the Green Berets, as you had said. In the Green Berets, not only do we learn how to kick doors in, but you learn how to train people and develop good teams, and we're what you call force multiplier. The idea is that 12 guys go into a country and all of a sudden you're turning into a battalion of fighting people, right? So it's kind of that mentality. And so the managing member of this investment group who bought it was about a year and a half older than I was, young Stanford MBA grad. But in all honesty, we were different for sure. He came with, financial wherewithal, professional contacts. And what did I have? The ability to lead and build teams. I didn't have money. I didn't have a network, none of those sorts of things. But we became quick friends. Desert Storm broke out. I went back on active duty. I ended up going to the Defense Language Institute. So I was on active duty, got off, went back on active duty. But when I came back, came and talked to this guy and said, "Hey, I'm going to be moving to Mexico for a couple of years." Again, we were friends at this point. Going to move to Mexico for a couple of years and live on the beaches. And I bought a couple of ATVs, bought a Winnebago. Because I've been working ever since I was a teenager, right? Never taken time off.
Right.
So he said, "Listen, I'm frankly overwhelmed. I'm about to pick up our third property. I need someone just to do the operations and to lead, these people. I know what I'm good at. I'm better at the creative part. I'm better at the marketing part. You're better at this. Why don't we become, you don't have to put any money in."
Really?
Yeah. And I said, "Well, give me 24 hours to think about it." Because I still hadn't finished my university. And so I thought about it. Where else am I going to walk into any company that's basically well-funded, where I can step in and become a partner? And so I did. And so we picked up 14 hotels in 14 years. And I was, partner and senior VP at this company.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I want to share. This was right before I asked you to be my coach. I was having an issue with somebody, and I remember I texted you to see if you could be like a mediator, right? Because you knew him, you know me, and it wasn't anything like really bad. It was just something like it wasn't an emergency. It was just like, hey, Larry, I need some help. Maybe you could talk to this guy. And you called me 3 minutes and I asked you what you were doing, and you're like, well, because it was cold. It was COVID. I don't know if you remember this, but you're like, I'm going to lay off like 1,000 people. I was like, are you kidding me? Why did you call? And you said because you asked for help. Do you remember that?
I do now. Yeah. Yeah. I remember we had labs. 7% of our company.
Yeah, so I got off the phone. I'm like, oh my God, how, like, I'm thinking myself, if I got to go lay off 1,000 people, or even, I've had to lay people, and it's like, for me, it was devastating. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to let this person. What's going through your mind? Like, what exactly? Because I know you came out of COVID, you survived, right? But at that time, what do you think? Why did God do this to me?
Oh, you mean
What
the,
did I
the
do to
COVID thing?
deserve? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting question. So, I mentioned I was a partner at that other company. Leaving that company, I kept my partnership for a bunch of years in it, but stepped out of my day-to-day role, moved to Southern California. I was married at the time, started my own hotel company down here in 2000. Was it 2000, 2001? Doesn't matter. It was the year was 9/11. Yeah, 2001, I guess. So, yeah, so COVID came creeping, and I'll be honest with you, I was pissed. I could see the markings that this was not just some mystical natural pandemic. I'd been around the world enough. I knew that we were being manipulated, if I'm being really honest with you. And I did not like the way the government was handling it, because it was just shutting down businesses and taking away the livelihoods of all of these people. And so it was a mixture
Good.
of uncertainty, anger, frustration, while at the same time having to put on an upbeat, positive face to my team members, investors, as best I could, right? Because we still had, of the hotels that we owned, or those hotels that we managed, we were responsible for making sure that the mortgages were being paid. By the way, during COVID, you didn't get debt forgiveness. You still had to make your mortgage, right? Some hotels, like you had
Yeah.
for the CBS loan, you were not allowed to close, or you were in default of your business. But the municipality is telling you you have to close down. And so we were having to do these stupid political, municipal battles as well. So anyway, it was an absolute struggle, and it broke my heart that we were going to have to let people go, or at least lay them off, and we didn't know for how long. Not because the our hotels were underperforming, not because they were mismanaged, not because of some nefarious activities of our leadership team. No, just because the government, you have to, you know, and that's against every capitalist bone in my body. So anyway, that day that you had called, we made the decision, well, we're going to have to let go. I think it was something like 64 to 67% of our workforce was going to be laid off, and so we had to, go to meetings, make phone calls, and it was rough. But I knew that I can multitask. I wasn't there yet. The problem that you had posed wasn't like earth shattering. Sometimes people just need for you, and you did. You needed someone to talk through things. Once we start talking through things, we start solving them on our own. But if we keep it in our heads, and it's called rumination. We start ruminating about it, right? Instead of talking it through. When you talk things through, there has to be something that comes out of our mouth, right? And if sometimes I just have to ask
That's
questions.
why that group that you were talking about is powerful.
Yeah, my Wednesday group.
You have a whole group of people that you can actually, say this is going on, and all right, but
Yeah. Well, that was it. I just think that, so for me, there were 4 guys in our group. Now there's 3. I don't talk about things to a group of 40. For me, this kind of small, intimate group works, where we can just talk things through and have people ask probing questions. Clarifying questions is what I call them. Tell me more about this. What did you mean by that? And it gives us an opportunity to problem solve on our own. You may notice that when I was mentoring you, there were times I didn't often come in and say, Joe, you need. That's easy to do for anyone. A good mentor helps your client have the awakening on their own, and you teach them how to think through problems. If I come in and just solve your problems over and over again, you're not learning anything, and you sit back like a like a baby with a pacifier, versus just, okay, what's really going on? What could we possibly do? And just ask some clarifying. So that's what I think a good mentor would do. And if you want to kind of shallow the ups and downs of the entrepreneurial roller coaster, have mentors and have an accountability group who have kind of that approach to you, because the lows aren't, they're not such steep drop offs. You know, it's not like you're going off the edge of a cliff. It's like a downhill racer kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so that is kind of the importance of asking these questions. I think I've lost track of what your question though for me was, Joe. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, you answered it, but you
Okay.
brought up the roller coaster thing, and that's exactly why I started this podcast.
Oh,
Because, and I told you before we started, in my experience, because I deal with a lot of brand new business,
yeah,
and
sure.
I see it all the time. They get by all the things that they have to do, the overwhelm. Wait, I just wanted to build houses. Now, now you got to be the accountant, you got to be the marketing specialist,
Right.
you got to be the compliance guy, because if
Yeah.
something goes wrong, who's going to pay, right?
Right.
When you start a business, you're automatically out of, and that's another thing. People say, well, I didn't have time to, give you my bank statements. Like, you decided to go into business. And the minute you do that, it's 24/7 unless you figure out how to deal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I tell my clients this, I said, it's not if something happens, it's when.
That's right.
Okay. There's a book called I think it's called The Road Less.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them, just read the introduction, read the first paragraph, because he says life is tough. Did you ever read that book?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Yeah. So he says life is, get over it. As soon as you can accept that life, you can have a good life, right?
Yeah.
And that's what business is like. Everything is
Absolutely.
relative. Right? I have clients. I have this one client in particular. He called me about 4 months, and he's like, "Listen, I got to put your services on hold. All my clients just stop paying me, and I don't want to have bills that I can't pay. I really like you." And I was like, "What are you kidding? You need me now more than ever." And I said, besides the fact, I said, you nearly died 10 years ago. And you're going to let a little thing like your client stop paying you ruin everything? Because he was ready to, go back to his. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And
Yeah.
so, I told him and the things that you taught me, I told him to do. Right. And now 4 months later, everything's fine. Like, he started getting new clients, the money's coming in, and he's happy. So,
I love what you're doing.
you had to deal with COVID, and I know you dealt with a lot of. What do you tell people who you're coaching, you're mentoring? Do you tell them what I tell them? Like, listen, just be prepared, because no matter where you in your business, you could be a multi-gazillionaire. And I tell them, even Elon Musk has bad days, right? Stuff happens.
Yeah.
What do you tell people? And I want to close with this, because I know you're aware when it comes to like explaining stuff. What is your advice to people, especially people that are just starting a business? They haven't hit that obstacle, but that.
Well, it's multi-pronged. Not the first thing, but I oftentimes share with people this by the brilliant, everyone's got a plan until they get punched. You are going to get punched. Okay. That punch in the face might be an economic downturn. It might be your marketing person taking the entire book of business that they've developed to another company. So you got to really plan for that. I think a lot of folks, Joe, get into the entrepreneurial arena thinking, I make great cupcakes. All my friends have told me my cupcakes are great, and so I'm going to make cupcakes. And what they realize, I need capital. I'm probably going to have to get some kind of health permit in order to do this. I'm going to have inspections. There's going to be, since some of these things are made with commodities, my prices are going to go up and down constantly. I got to find team members who are actually going to show up on time. Now I've got to get vehicles. Well, I got vehicles. That means I have to get inspections. And if the vehicle is a certain type of vehicle, I've got to get special licensing that only certain people are allowed to have. And so there's all these other myriad of decisions and problems that come in. I just want to make damn cupcakes. I don't want all these other things, right? I mean, I've got to actually, if I'm going to be doing these cupcakes, I've got to have money coming in. Well, if money's coming in, I've got to have somebody asking for that money and billing. I just want to make. So this is where we need to understand, as you were saying, in the beginning, you're going to be wearing out, and there will be sleep. And so you need to have folks in your life, Joe, who are really giving you the tough love, who will be a cheerleader for you for sure, right? But who are also going to say, you got this, dig deep, serve other people, those types of things. However, the sooner you get standard operating procedures, right? The sooner you train someone to bring them in so that they can actually do this without you, the better you are going to be. I'm blown away, as probably you are too, when you have clients and you realize they don't have one thing in their business on everything. And no wonder they feel the weight of the world on them, is because they couldn't hand over opening up the shop to someone else if they wanted to, because no one knows how to come in and turn off the alarm system. Where do I get money for the bank? What's my inventory supposed to look like that day? Everything is in. So it's set up standard operating procedures, have systems in place so that the business can run without you. I have seen this more times than I can count now, where someone has had a potential buyer has come in and said, hey, I'd love to buy your business from you. Let's talk about valuations. They don't have financial statements. They don't have systems in place. And the potential buyer says, oh, and by the way, I don't want you involved. When escrow closes, and they lose that potential buyer because the value of a business comes from the systems that you hold that are supporting the product. Does that make sense? I could be creating these beautiful cupcakes, but if someone can't come in and the value has been woeful. So
the mindset I run into all the time, and because you say this, and I used to hate when you were on stage and you would say you're gonna fail. And I was like, why does he tell people that? It's so negative. And then I realized, yeah, you're going to fail, but then what did you say? Fail fast. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's my other mantra around this, Joe, is that reality is our friend. When we realize that that we could or may fail, plan for it. I don't get up on stage and say, you're going to fail and walk off stage. No, I say the likelihood, if you look at statistics from the Small Business Administration or a variety of other prognosticators out there, most businesses fail within the first 12 months, first 3 years, they fail. They go under. All right, that doesn't mean all, but do you have the tenacity to fight through it? Do you have the oomph? Do you have the systems in place that when the going gets tough, you can fight on for another day, right? And so that all the things that we've talked about, whole health spidergraph, mentors, accountability groups, serving other people, standard operating procedures, those things diminish the odds that you're going to fail. But most people don't do any of the handful of things that we've talked about.
Yeah.
They have an idea and somehow they start making cupcakes and think, bring the money on. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And I like to say that entrepreneurs are dumb, right? Because they think, oh, I'm just going to make cupcakes. I make the greatest cupcakes in the world, and I'm going to become a millionaire. But you also say something else. What do you say? If you can't afford an accountant when you start you should.
If you can't afford accounting and legal, you can't afford to be in business. Those two areas, people they pay for.
This is the mindset that I run across, and this is like the problem that I want to solve. And I want you to tell me or give me some idea, how do I solve this? They say, I'm going to do all that when I start making money. You ever hear that? I'm going to hire an accountant when I start making money. I'm going to do the standard operating procedures when I start. How do you
all these things? Well, some people you can't because some people, so you say it when you can. If they don't want to accept it, then you got to move on. Try not to get emotionally invested in their crap show, right? Because there will be some people who will listen, right? What they don't want to do is go out and raise money. Sometimes you got to borrow money from family and friends. Sometimes you got to pull some money out of a savings account if this is really what you want to do. And I'm not suggesting people do this because I don't know your story. But sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to bring in an investor. Maybe that investor is, Aunt Sally. I don't know. But you're never going to grow out of not having good systems, good accounting, good legal, right? You have to have those things, or else you're always going to be in this perpetual state of trying to get caught up, and there will always be overwhelm in this. So
Yes.
that's what I would say if I were you. And again, sometimes not everyone is going to be your.
Yes, I understand that. But I just had this thing in me that I'm like, when is enough money? When you start making money, like, what's the number that you're gonna like start doing the things that you're supposed to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they're going to say a lot of people have never stopped to think about that. Most people don't even know what the value of, you know, how much you think you're going to make this first year. Oh, I'm going to make $5 million. From zero, you're going to make $5 million in year one. Do you know how few businesses act? Well, but I'm not like other people. Okay, so what's the plan to get there? Blah, blah, blah. They don't have a plan to get there, right? And there, it's like single digits is the number of U.S. businesses that have ever hit the $1 million a year mark. This is a country of small businesses, right? But I try not to quench that too much because, like it or not, entrepreneurs have this funny combination of or egomaniacs with a inferiority.
Yes.
You need a little bit of that egomania to say I can do it when other people are telling you you can't. Um, and you need the inferiority complex a little bit because like we're always looking over our shoulder. Is the competition chasing me? I'm never good enough, and so I've got to learn more. I've got to do more, right? And so it's a weird combination. Being in a relationship with an entrepreneur is not an easy thing, right?
Uh,
And so we need to like step
well,
back.
my ex is that.
Well, but I would just encourage folks get to borrow or raise money if you have to, through invest. Uh, it's not sustainable that going on for X number of years, fill in the number of years that you want. If you don't have systems, you don't have accounting, you don't have access to legal. And the good thing nowadays, a lot of this stuff is a more cost-effective bundle because of technology, right? I'm not saying
Yes.
use AI for all this stuff. That is not what I'm saying. Not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that there are, because of technology, we can find instead of paying $1,000 for accounting every month for a bookkeeper, there are ways to do it so it's much less than that. But you got.
I was talking about this in my last podcast, just doing research. When I was researching my colleges, I had to go to the library and spend hours just to find the right college.
Right.
So,
Right.
before we started, I said it was going to be a challenge to keep this to 40 minutes, and it has been. But it's been awesome. We're gonna do part two. I'll let you know. But what I like, because you've been a master at this for me, give me some short words of wisdom for somebody that's just going into.
I don't know if I've got anything pithy, but I would say I think we've hit on much of it. Get a mentor for some. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Learn, 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 learn. Consume as much information as you can, and maybe habit stacking. If you don't know what habit stacking is, go Google it. But the idea is this: you need to be physically fit. You need to be fueling the mind. So like this morning, I went out and I did my 8,000 steps this morning, but I was listening to an entrepreneurial podcast. Right. So I'm getting physically fit while I'm also feeding my brain. Right.
Yeah,
Habit stack.
I do the same. And in fact, an hour before we did this, I went to the gym. I did a couple of laps in the pool. So yeah, All right, Dr. Broughton, thank you so much for your time. That's our story, folks. We're sticking with it. God bless, and we will see you next time. Follow the podcast. We're going to have great information, great guests like Larry Broughton. See you next time.